Welcome to QuickSpeak the English podcast that helps you learn about interesting topics and improve your English skills at the same time. Today, we're going to talk about something that's on everyone's mind: money and happiness.
It's a question as old as time, isn't it? Can money buy happiness?
Exactly. I think we've all wondered about that at some point.
Yeah.
But it's probably more complicated than just a simple yes or no answer.
Absolutely. There's a lot of research on this topic, and it turns out the relationship between money and happiness is pretty nuanced.
Okay, so let's unpack this. What are some of the key things we need to consider when we're talking about money and happiness?
Well, one of the most interesting ideas is something called the Easterlin paradox. Have you ever heard of that?
The Easterlin paradox. That's a new one for me. Tell me more.
It's the observation that while richer people within a country tend to be happier at a given moment as a country's overall wealth grows over time, the average happiness of its citizens doesn't necessarily increase.
That's really thought-provoking.
Yeah.
So even if everyone's getting richer, the overall happiness level doesn't really change. Why is that?
One possible explanation has to do with social comparison. As a society gets wealthier, even though people might have more money, they're still comparing themselves to others. So if everyone around you is also getting richer, your own gains might not feel as significant.
Ah, that makes sense. It's like the saying, keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
We're always measuring our success against others, even if we're all doing better overall.
Exactly. And this is just one piece of the puzzle. Another thing to consider is that there are different ways to measure happiness.
Oh, right. It's not like there's one simple question you can ask to figure out if someone is happy or not.
Exactly. Researchers often talk about two main types of happiness: evaluative well-being and experienced well-being. Evaluative well-being is about your overall life satisfaction. It's like taking a step back and asking yourself, how happy am I with my life as a whole?
Okay, so evaluative well-being is the big picture view. What about experienced well-being?
Experienced well-being is more about your day-to-day mood. It's how you're feeling in the moment. Are you feeling content, stressed, excited?
So evaluative is like a broad assessment of your life, while experienced is more about your current emotional state.
And that's a good way to put it. And the interesting thing is that different factors seem to affect these two types of happiness differently. For example, getting married seems to have a big impact on evaluative well-being. People tend to report higher overall life satisfaction after getting married, but it doesn't seem to have as much of an impact on their day-to-day mood.
So a big life change can make you feel more satisfied with your life in general, but it might not necessarily change how you feel on a daily basis.
Right. And on the flip side, something like losing your job might not completely derail your overall life satisfaction, but it can definitely affect your mood and emotions in the short term.
That's so true. I can imagine feeling really down if I lost my job, even if I generally felt good about my life before that. So how does all this relate back to money?
Well, these different ways of measuring happiness help us understand why money doesn't always equal happiness in a simple, straightforward way. We need to consider what kind of happiness we're talking about: overall life satisfaction or day-to-day mood, and recognize that money might play different roles in each.
So the relationship between money and happiness is definitely more complex than we might initially think.
It is, and there's another psychological concept that's really important to understand here: hedonic adaptation. It's also known as the hedonic treadmill.
Okay, the hedonic treadmill. What's that all about?
Essentially, hedonic adaptation is the idea that we get used to good things.
Like getting a new car or a raise at work.
Exactly. You get a new car and you're thrilled, you love it for a while, but eventually that new car feeling fades and it just becomes your car. You get used to it. The same thing can happen with raise a new house or any other positive change. We experience a boost in happiness, but then we adapt and our happiness level kind of goes back to where it was before. So even if something good happens, our happiness levels tend to return to a baseline over time. Is that why people say things like, money can't buy happiness? Because it can't buy lasting happiness?
That's part of it. Hedonic adaptation helps explain why simply having more money doesn't guarantee long-term happiness. We get used to having a certain amount of money, and then we want more.
That makes sense. But if we get used to good things, doesn't that mean we're doomed to always want more and never be truly satisfied?
Not necessarily. There are things we can do to combat the hedonic treadmill and savor happiness for longer. For example, research suggests that spending money on experiences like travel or concerts tends to bring more lasting happiness than spending money on material possessions.
That makes sense. Experiences create memories that we can look back on and enjoy long after the event is over. They become part of who we are.
Exactly. And another strategy is to practice gratitude. Taking the time to appreciate the good things in our lives, big and small, can help us stay focused on the positive and avoid getting caught up in constantly wanting more. So being mindful of what we already have can actually boost our happiness. I like that. What else can we do to fight against this hedonic treadmill?
Focusing on personal growth and building strong relationships are also key. When we invest in ourselves and our connections with others, we create a sense of meaning and purpose that goes beyond material possessions.
So it's not just about the stuff we have, but about who we are and who we're surrounded by.
Precisely. It's about cultivating a life that's rich in experiences, relationships, and personal fulfillment.
This is really making me think about my own priorities and what truly matters to me. So we've talked about the Easterlin paradox, different ways to measure happiness, and the hedonic treadmill. All of these things suggest that the relationship between money and happiness is quite complex. But is there a point where money stops making us happier? Like, is there a magic number?
That's where things get even more intriguing. The idea of a happiness threshold has been a topic of much debate. A happiness threshold is the idea that there might be a certain income level where beyond that point, having more money doesn't really make you any happier. Some studies suggest this threshold might be around $75,000 per year.
So once you hit $75,000, you're essentially as happy as you're going to get, and any extra money after that won't really move the needle.
Well, it's not quite that simple. Other research suggests that happiness might actually keep increasing as income goes up, even beyond that $75,000 mark. Some studies have even found that happiness continues to rise with income all the way up to $500,000 or more.
Wow. So the research is kind of all over the place.
It is. There doesn't seem to be a one-size-fits-all answer. It seems like some people might hit a happiness ceiling at a certain income level, while others might find that their happiness continues to climb as they earn more.
So how are we supposed to make sense of all of this? If the research is so mixed, how can we figure out what's true for us as individuals?
It's important to remember that everyone is different. Our individual circumstances, values, and personalities all play a role in how money affects our happiness.
Right. So there's no magic number that applies to everyone. What other factors do we need to consider?
Cost of living is a big one. What $75,000 can buy you in one part of the world might be very different from what it can buy you in another. And it's not just about the absolute amount of money you have. It's also about how you feel about your finances.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you're constantly stressed out about money, or if you're always comparing yourself to others who have more money, you're probably not going to be very happy, even if you're earning a decent income. Your mindset about money really matters.
So even if you're doing okay financially, you can still be unhappy if you have a negative attitude towards money,
Yeah,
or if you're constantly comparing yourself to others.
absolutely. And here's another interesting finding from the research. People who are overly focused on financial success often report lower levels of satisfaction in other areas of their lives.
Really? So chasing money too aggressively can actually backfire, make us unhappy in other ways.
It can. They might experience more stress, have less free time for things they enjoy, or even have problems in their relationships because they're so fixated on making money. It's all about balance.
So we need to find a balance between our financial goals and other important aspects of our lives, like our health, relationships, and hobbies.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that a good life is about more than just your bank account. It's about having good physical and mental health, strong social connections, a sense of purpose, and a supportive environment to live in. It's about having what researchers call psychosocial wealth.
Psychosocial wealth. That sounds interesting. Tell me more.
It's basically the idea that having supportive relationships, opportunities for personal growth, and a sense of belonging in your community can be just as important for happiness as having a high income.
So it's not just about the money you have in the bank. It's about the quality of your relationships, the opportunities you have to learn and grow, and the feeling that you're part of something larger than yourself.
That's right. And studies have shown that these factors can be even more important for happiness than income, especially for people who are already earning a decent living.
So having good friends, feeling connected to your community, and doing work that you find fulfilling can actually make a bigger difference to your happiness than getting a raise.
In many cases, yes. It seems counterintuitive, but that's what the research suggests. And let's not forget about the impact of social comparison. It can really undermine our happiness. Even if we have plenty of money, we might still feel inadequate if we're constantly comparing ourselves to people who seem to have even more.
That makes a lot of sense, especially in today's world where we're bombarded with images of wealth and success on social media. It's easy to get caught up in the comparison game and feel like we're not measuring up.
It is, which is why it's so important to focus on our own values and what truly matters to us, rather than getting caught up in what other people have or what society tells us we should want.
So we need to define what a good life means to us personally and then make choices that support that vision regardless of how much money we have.
That's a great way to put it. It's about living intentionally and making sure our actions are aligned with our values.
I love that. So far, we've been talking a lot about the big picture when it comes to money and happiness. But what about our day-to-day decisions? How can we spend our money in a way that actually boosts our happiness in the moment?
That's a great question. And it brings us to the topic of spending wisely. Have you ever noticed that sometimes you make spending decisions that don't really make logical sense?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure we've all been there.
There's a psychological phenomenon called mental accounting that can help explain some of those seemingly irrational choices.
Mental accounting. What's that?
It basically means that we tend to treat money differently depending on where it came from or what we're planning to use it for.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Think about how people often treat a tax refund differently from their regular paycheck. They might be more likely to splurge on a big purchase with a tax refund, even though it's essentially the same as the money they earn from their job.
Oh, yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah.
It feels like bonus money, so I'm more likely to spend it on something fun.
Exactly. But logically, it's all just money. Mental accounting can sometimes lead us to make decisions that aren't really in our best financial interests.
So our brains can trick us into spending money in ways that don't actually make sense.
That's right. And another factor that can really influence our spending is our emotions.
Oh, yeah. Retail therapy. I know all about that.
We've all been there. When we're feeling stressed, sad, or even just a little bit bored, we might turn to shopping as a way to boost our mood. It can feel good in the moment, but it can also lead to overspending and regret later on.
So we need to be more aware of how our emotions can influence our spending decisions.
Absolutely. Understanding the psychology of spending can help us make more conscious choices about how we use our money.
This is all so fascinating. I'm starting to see how much our mindset and our emotions really play into our relationship with money.
They do. And that's why it's so important to develop a healthy relationship with money. It's not about seeing money as the enemy or as the only source of happiness. It's about finding a balance and understanding that money is a tool that can be used to support a fulfilling life.
So how do we cultivate that kind of healthy relationship with money? It sounds easier said than done.
One important step is to become more mindful of our spending habits. It's easy to go through life on autopilot, swiping our credit cards without really thinking about where our money is going.
Well, I'm definitely guilty of that. Sometimes I look at my bank statement at the end of the month and I'm like, where did all my money go?
That's a common experience.
Yeah.
But by becoming more aware of our spending patterns, we can start to make more conscious choices about how we use our money.
So how do we become more mindful of our spending? Should we be tracking every little thing we buy?
It doesn't have to be that intense. Just taking a few minutes each week to review your spending can be really eye-opening. You can look over your bank statements, your credit card bills, or even just keep a simple log of your purchases in a notebook. The key is to just start paying attention to where your money is going.
Okay, so awareness is the first step. What do we do with that information once we have a better understanding of our spending habits?
Once you're more aware, you can start to identify any areas where you might be overspending or where you can make some adjustments to better align your spending with your values and your goals.
For example, if I notice I'm spending a lot of money on takeout, but I also really value cooking at home and eating healthy meals, I could try to reduce my takeout spending and use that money to buy more groceries instead.
Exactly. It's all about those small changes that can make a big difference over time. And it's not about depriving yourself or feeling guilty about spending money. It's about making conscious choices and making sure your money is supporting the kind of life you want to live.
It's about being intentional with our spending and making sure it reflects what truly matters to us.
That's a great way to put it. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be times when you slip up or make a choice that isn't perfectly aligned with your goals. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just keep learning, keep making adjustments, and keep moving forward.
Progress over perfection. Yeah.
Exactly. And here's something else that's important to remember. You don't have to figure all of this out on your own. There are so many resources available to help you manage your finances, create a budget, and achieve your financial goals.
Like financial advisors, budgeting apps, and even just talking to friends or family members who are good with money.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to reach out for support and guidance. There's no shame in wanting to improve your financial literacy and create a more secure and fulfilling future for yourself.
This conversation has been incredibly insightful. I feel like I'm walking away with a whole new perspective on money and happiness.
I'm so glad to hear that. And just remember, money is a tool, not your master. By using it wisely, aligning your spending with your values, and focusing on the things that truly matter, you can create a life that is rich in both financial well-being and happiness.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. This has been really fascinating, and I think it's something that all of our listeners can relate to.
It's been my pleasure.
And for those of you listening, if you'd like to keep learning with us, be sure to subscribe to QuickSpeak English for more interesting topics explained in clear, easy-to-understand English. We release new episodes every week, so hit that subscribe button and you'll never miss an episode.
And don't forget to check out our website for more learning materials like vocabulary lists, exercises, and transcripts from today's episode. You can find a link to our website in the description below.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you in the next episode.